He would put padlocks on the outside of the door so I couldn't get out the doors. And then I was afraid to escape. If I didn't get away, he was going to kill me because he would put a shotgun, he would load it, he would put it up to my chin and pull the hammer back and tell me if I tried to leave, he would kill me. Hi, my name is Nancy Norris, and today I'm telling my testimony. I guess the easiest place to start is kind of the unique way of my birth and kind of how I was conceived, I guess. My mom and dad met. My dad was married. Was married with 3 children. My mom was married. She had 3 children. She met my dad on a construction site, and they got together, and he was working at construction sites, and she was following him from one place to the other, and she left her first husband and 3 kids. And she didn't see them. I think I was about 8 or 9 years old whenever she seen them again. So she kind of walked away from that, went with my dad. And whenever my mom found out she was pregnant with me, my dad brought her to his house with his wife and their 3 kids and said, "This is my concubine, and she is pregnant with my child, and she's going to live here." My dad was he was an alcoholic, abusive. So his first wife really didn't have a choice other than to play along. I can't imagine how that would have felt, and I never really talked to Marge about, how she kind of felt about that day and how that all happened. But talking to my sisters and my brother that were a lot older than me, it was not pretty, to say the least. But so my sisters and my brother remember that Marge didn't take offense to me, to the unborn child. She told my mom that I was going to be a girl. My mom was adamant that I was going to be a boy. And so they fought over that. Funny enough, of all things to fight over. But the closer I got to being born, my dad wouldn't allow my mom to buy things for me. She wasn't allowed to buy the little things in advance. So Marge took her bassinet that she had used for her 3 kids, and she started filling it with girl things. Just picking things up at garage sales, yard sales, or, 5 and dimes and things like that. And filled it up, thankfully. When my mom went into labor with me, they went to the hospital, and I was coming out feet first. And my mom ended up having to go to a different hospital. She had to be taken by emergency ambulance to a hospital that was about an hour away. And I was left in the hospital. And my dad was with her working or whatever he was doing. But about 4 or 5 days old, the hospital contacted my dad and said, "You need to come get your child, or we're going to have to turn her over to the state for being abandoned." So my mother was still in the hospital at this point, and so he went and got his wife and brought her to the hospital, and I went home with her. And so when my mom got out of the hospital a couple of days later, I think I was 7 days old whenever my mom first got to hold me and see me. Marge was an amazing woman for doing that. She loved me like I was one of her own kids. Most of my childhood was spent with her, and what did end up becoming her next husband, Dudley. I was his little peanut, and when my mom was out on construction sites with my dad or whatever, I would stay with them. And so most of my childhood I was raised with my 2 sisters. My brother was a lot older, and he had, gotten married. I don't remember a lot with him, but when I was 7, 8 years old, my mother and father divorced. He was extremely abusive. One of my first memories is him putting me out on the porch because he was upset with me because one of his friends had come over for dinner and paid attention to me, and he got upset. And so later that evening, I woke up and heard arguing, and my mother and father were arguing, and he put me on the porch and kept me there for a while. It was the end of November. And I can remember sitting there thinking, it's so cold outside. Like, why am I out here on the porch with just my gown, no socks, no anything. Should I call the police? But I knew if I called the police that it would be worse for my mom. And I looked in the window, and he was holding a stick of wood and threatening her if she tried to get me off the porch, he'd kill her. And I'm sure she probably believed that. He tried to several times. But that was probably one of my earliest memories of that relationship. And the whole relationship of everything I remember is pretty much made up of that type of environment. So when I was 8, whenever my mom and dad got divorced, and my dad, my biological father, told my stepfather at the time, it's a package deal. You get one, you get both. And so I didn't see a lot of my dad. After that, he didn't come visit. I recall a couple of times him living in a trailer and me being there with my sister and eating Denny Moore beef stew and block cheese. And he was a big hunter. He liked to hunt and fish, or I don't know if he ever caught anything, but it was a good drinking environment. But me and my sister were at his house for some reason, and he had these traps, which to me, I guess at the time, seemed like bear traps. They could have been small game traps, but they opened it and had these big claw teeth, and he had put a piece of cheese on it and was trying to convince my sister to be quick enough to get the cheese and get back before the jaws took her head off. And I used to think that was just so crazy. If you hear that story now, you think, what father would do that to their daughter? But my sister and I have talked about that, and she remembers it very, very vividly. And we both know that Dad did love us, and he was not trying to kill either one of us. He would not have dared have let my sister actually try it. But she adored him, and she probably would have tried if he would have let her. But at about that relationship, when my mom married my stepdad, I had my first Christmas because my dad was a Jehovah's Witness, a devout Jehovah's Witness, even though he had been disfellowshipped because the congregation, considering my dad was married and got another woman pregnant and, out of wedlock and all that, they disfellowshipped him from the local congregation of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And so, but we still went. I still remember going some to the Kingdom Hall. My older brother, he was a devout Jehovah's Witness all his life. But whenever I started going to church, whenever my mom married my stepdad, I started going to a little Methodist church down the road. It was, we lived way back in the country, and I thought it was so great because we got a brand new trailer delivered just for us. I mean, it was brand new, delivered, set up, had my own room. My mom was pregnant with one of my younger sisters at the time, and I just remember everything being calm and a family. And I had a stepsister and a stepbrother. They were quite a bit older than me, but they were nice to me. And we went out in big trucks and go mudding on the weekends. And my stepdad would let me talk on the CB radio, and I had my own handle. So, it was good. It was good for a long time. I had my first Christmas right after my mom and stepdad got married that year. I remember I was 9, and my mom had made me a Raggedy Ann doll. She had actually, because my mom sews, and she had made me a Raggedy Ann doll and embroidered a heart on the butt of it. So it was treasured, But when I was about 12 or 13 years old, things started getting volatile. They started drinking and going to bars and coming home fighting and different things. And my stepsister had gotten pregnant with her third child. Her first child was raised by our grandmother. The only grandparents I ever really knew was my step-grandparents, Mom and Pa Hobbs. And they were amazing. All of my grandparent memories are with them. But she had gotten pregnant with her second child, belonged to her husband that she had married, and he was raising her. And then the third one, she was going to give up for adoption. And so my mom and my stepdad decided to adopt her so she wasn't outside of the family. So she became legally my little sister. And I remember it getting worse and worse, Mom would leave, and she would say she was going to go pay the bills or she was going to town, and she wouldn't come back for several days or weeks or however long it was. And so in her absence, because when she did work, she worked in a pajama factory, like sewing factory, and she would a lot of times work nights. And so I was taking care of my two little sisters. We all slept in the same room, same bed. I was changing diapers and doing laundry and getting homework and doing all the things that just needed to be done for them. One of the occasions that the bad occasion that caused my mom to leave for a longer period of time was they had come home from drinking, and I heard the arguing, and I was holding my sister. She had woke up crying, and my stepdad had a gun up to my mom's chin, and I was just begging him not to shoot my mom. So I said, just let her leave. Just let her leave. And so she did. I don't know if it was the next night or that night or the next night or however long it was, but I was going through the motions of just taking care of them, taking care of myself, making sure I got my homework, making sure my sister got her homework, making sure they had baths, making sure we had laundry, laundry, clean clothes, make sure we had food on the table. So I do remember occasions where I would get up and get ready for school, get my sister ready for school. My youngest sister, the one that was adopted, but she's my sister, she was little. She was probably 15, 18 months old. And I would get her diaper bag ready. We would all go, and I'd get on the bus. And the next stop was my grandmother's house, where we would pick up my nephew. And I would give my grandmother my little sister. I'd go to school. I'd come home. I'd get off the bus at her house. Gather the things, and I would walk through the field and go home. And that would start my routine of taking care of them, taking care of myself, and getting us to bed. And I still managed somehow to make straight A's and B's in school. I think for me school was always an escape for me. It was safe. I was very, very shy. Walked down the hallway, just head down, didn't want anybody to talk to me. So I didn't have a whole lot of friends, but the friends I had were close. But one night I was at home, and my stepdad told us to get in the truck, and so we would get in the truck, and a lot of times we would go, and he would go to a local beer joint or whatever, and he didn't want to, for whatever reason. I was 15 years old, 14, 15, and I was taking care of him, but he didn't want to leave us home alone. So we would go, and he would go in the beer joint, and we would sit in the truck. And so one night we had been sitting there in the truck for a while, and I'd run out of anything to put in my little sister's bottle, and she was crying. We just needed to get home. So I went in and told him, she was out of diapers and out of something for her bottle. So he came back out to the truck. He was stumbling, and it was obvious he was just stumbling drunk. And I thought, we have got to go down the mountain, because we lived in Grundy County. And to get from the beer joint back down to our house, we had to go down the mountain. And there wasn't a whole lot of guardrails or anything, and it was, all you could see was down the mountain. And so I just remember praying, God, just keep us safe. Just get us home. Car seats and seat belts were not a thing back in the 80s, 70s and 80s. So I remember holding my sister. She had fallen asleep. My little sister was on my side, and I just remember praying, God, just get us home, because he was swerving all over the road. And finally we get home, and I was putting them to bed, and he come back there and told me he needed to talk to me about something. So I come outside. He was out on the porch, and I came outside, and he told me how proud he was of me for all I was doing to take care of the family and to put food on put meals on the table and take care of my sisters the way I had, and still taking care of myself and the house and all the things. And he told me I had one more duty to fill, that with my mother being gone, he was lonely, and I needed to fill that role. And so I just remember him, he put his hand up my shirt, and I pushed him away, and I ran to my room just thinking, at the time, I weighed maybe 75, 80 pounds. I mean, I was a stick. And he was a big guy. He was probably close to 6 foot tall, I guess, and probably weighed 200 pounds. To me, he was a giant. But I thought if I go to my room and my little sisters are laying there, he won't come in there. And he did. He came in the room. He laid down on the bed. My little sisters were asleep. And again, I just remember praying, God, just don't let them wake up and see this. Just don't let them wake up and see him in here. And he laid there crying and, apologizing and just telling me, how lonely he was and how unfair it was that my mom left us. And finally he passed out. And at some point in time I went to sleep, and when I woke up, he was not in my room anymore. So it began a cycle of what I didn't know now, what is now called grooming. Just getting me in the mindset that this was my duty. This was what I was going to have to do. I didn't tell anybody for a long time. For some periods of time, Mom would come back home, and I never told her. And when she was home, everything was fine. We went back to normal life. Everything was great. And when she would leave, he would start up again. So I just prayed, Mom, don't leave. Every time she would go out the driveway, I was scared to death she wasn't going to come back. So lo and behold, I ended up telling a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, that she was my best friend at the time. I told her what had been going on, and she was going to come rescue me. Her and her boyfriend were going to come rescue me, and he had a car, and I remember didn't have cell phones then, so you just had landlines, and I was talking to her on the phone, and I was like, okay, whenever, my room is on the end, he won't be able to hear you. Whenever I hear the car, see the lights come down the road, I'll go out my bedroom window and I'll come out there. And our driveway was probably a quarter to half a mile long. So, that was far enough it wouldn't be unusual for a car to be coming by. And I seen the lights. I was preparing to go out, and the dogs started barking. So here comes my stepdad, because when dogs bark like that, and there's somebody parked at the end of the driveway, they go into protective mode. They have a little bit different kind of bark. So they start barking. He goes out to the porch with his shotgun, hollering, who's there? And so obviously that was a failed plan. And a day or so later, I was at school, and a social worker came and talked to me at school. And my friend had told a teacher, and the teacher had called DCS. So that day they told me I wouldn't go home, that they allowed me to go home with my friend for that night. But I wasn't going to be able to go back home because that was not a safe environment for me. So my first reaction was, what about my two sisters? I went home with my friend. I think I stayed there a couple of days, and then my friend's parents were going to try me to come live with them. And that the judge wouldn't allow it, so I ended up going to a foster home. And I remember the social worker coming to get me, to take me to the foster home, was a different one that had come talk to me, and at school. And we were driving up the mountain, and I just remember being so scared of the unknown. Like, no matter how bad it was at home, it was better than not knowing who these people were and how they were going to treat me. And so I remember pulling up to the house, and it was the scariest house I'd ever seen in my life. It was huge. It had vines growing all over the front of it. It was gray. It had black shutters, and it was scary. It looked like a haunted house to me. And we pulled up in the driveway. The door opens. The little short, heavier set woman was in the doorway. I got my suitcase out. We went inside, and there was a man sitting at the table in full police uniform, had his gun on his side. It looked like it was humongous. I thought, they're going to kill me. I'm going to die. Like, this is it. They're going to shoot me, bury me back in the back under the gazebo. There's probably no telling how many bodies are back there. And my social worker was talking to my foster parents, and I just remember looking down at my suitcase thinking, why did I even say anything? Why did I even tell my friend? Why can't I just go home? Where are my sisters? Um, the next few days there were horrible for me. I didn't know them. I had been raising myself. I had been raising my sisters. Now these people are going to tell me every move I can make and who I can talk to on the phone and who I can't. And, um, I had a boyfriend at school, and he ended up being my first husband. We'll talk about that in a minute. But he was very upset that I had ended up in a foster home. He was very upset with me that I had told somebody what was happening and that I ended up in a foster home where we couldn't just go out on dates and he could come get me anytime he wanted. So my foster parents put down some rules. Well, that first weekend, they were going to a wedding out of town. Because I was new and considering the circumstances, they let me go spend the weekend with my friend. And the one that I had stayed with her parents, and they knew him, they had talked to him. So I had told them we were going to go to the ball game. It was Friday night. We were going to go to the football game. I was going to go spend the weekend with her. It was big time. Well, when I left school, I actually went with my boyfriend, not my friend. My friend actually had no idea about the story. So later that night, we were at a party in the middle of absolutely nowhere. I had no idea where I was. I had no idea whose house I was in. I was partying. I had a bottle of Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill wine in one hand, a cigarette in the other hand, and there was, between cigarette smoke and marijuana smoke, all filled the room. And I look up, and there stands my foster mom. I was like, well, okay. She said, get in the car. And not a word did she speak. Not a word did she speak. I just knew. I knew that was the night I was going to die. It was over. My life was over. It was horrible. I ended up having to go to the wedding out of town. So the next few years were just that. Me trying to figure out a way to get away from them. To be with my boyfriend. They had no idea what love was. He was constantly, when he would drop me off, if he would come and get me and we would go out and do our thing and he would bring me home, he would tell me, go in the house, you don't speak to them, don't say a word to them, go straight to your room, go to bed, do this, do that. And I would do just that. And my foster mom wasn't having no part of it. She was going to come talk to me. She was going to see how my date went. And she was just annoying. She wouldn't let me just have my peace. And so I ended up, he proposed to me that the Christmas, I think of my 17th. I turned 17 9 days before Christmas, and he proposed to me, and the planning the wedding was on. My foster parents would sit at that table and talk to me for hours and hours about how it was not a healthy relationship. I needed to focus on school. I needed to focus on myself, and they just didn't understand how much he loved me. And so I turned 18 on December the 16th, 1988, and I married him on December the 17th of 1988. And I looked back on pictures. I don't have any other pictures anymore, but when I did look back on the pictures, I had a frown. Like I knew how it was going to be. But at our wedding reception, he had left the wedding reception and had went outside, and his girlfriend had showed up. And she was upset because she wasn't invited to the wedding, I guess. But anyway, long story short, after the wedding, he had went with some friends and had went to the liquor store and was going to buy alcohol, and we were going to have a big party. And he ended up spending most of the night. I found out later he ended up spending most of the night with her. So, I was a senior in high school, straight A's, I'd get a B here and there, in the National Honor Society, Beta Club, all the things. I was not a dummy. If I'd applied myself, I probably could have done a whole lot better, but, the first time that he beat me up, that the beating started, was whenever I said I was going to go back to school after Christmas break because we got married. It was the first day of Christmas break. And I was going to go back to school in January, and I needed things. I needed pencils and paper and things, and he wasn't having any part of it, even though he had told me, "There's absolutely, you're going to graduate. It's going to be great. You're going to go back to school." And he wouldn't allow it. And he started bringing his girlfriend home with him. When I would wake up in the morning, he'd be gone for a couple of days at a time. He would put padlocks on the outside of the door so I couldn't get out the doors. And then I was afraid to escape. If I didn't get away, he was going to kill me, because he would put a shotgun, he would load it, he would put it up to my chin and pull the hammer back and tell me if I tried to leave, he would kill me. And I did believe that. So whenever I would wake up sometimes and they would be on the couch or wherever in the house, I cooked them breakfast and I ate when there was food left on their plates. So he had taken the phone at that time. Of course, I said we didn't have cell phones, so the phone was on the wall, really long cord, and he had cut the phone cord. I had to leave the phone on the hook, but the phone cord was cut. He did the same thing with my curling iron. He left it laying on the sink. And he cut the cord. I couldn't use it, but I was not to dare touch it. And if there was any evidence whatsoever that I had taken a bath while he was out with her, then I'd get beat. So I was to stay home, cook for them, keep the house clean, move his marijuana plants around, because he had, marijuana plants everywhere. And I remember waking up in the bed, him not being there, which was no surprise. And I come downstairs and he had some friends there, and they were getting high. And I thought, well, I'll just go in here and I'll start breakfast and I'll cook breakfast for them then. And he came into the kitchen and got me, brought me into the living room, and the three of them commenced to hold me down and rape me. Why would my husband need to do that? I never told him no. I never would have refused him. I guess it was just a game. But either way, after that happened, I left. I called my sister. I was at his mom's house one day, and he had left me at his mom's house to do laundry, because we didn't have a washer and dryer. I was using a ringer washer and dryer, and he had let me go over to his mom's and do laundry, because his mom and his grandmother were there, so there was no worry that I was going to be able to go anywhere. His mom left. She was going to the store, and his grandmother was there, and I used the phone, and I called my sister. I asked her to come get me. And there was a package store, probably 3 miles from her house. We lived out in the middle of nowhere. So I walked, and I had nothing on me. I didn't have a driver's license at the time. I had nothing on me but the clothes I was wearing. And I walked out the back door, and I walked through fields, and I didn't want to walk on the road because I was afraid he would drive by, or somebody he knew would drive by and see me walking. So by the time I got to the package store, behind it had a drive-through. You could see people coming through. I hid behind a big tree, waiting for my sister to come. I saw him come through the package store, and he had his girlfriend with him, and they bought alcohol, whatever they bought, and drove on off. And shortly after that, my sister pulled up. So it's her and her husband and her 2 little girls. So I ran and got in the car. I was absolutely disgusting. I stank. I don't know what I stepped in, if it was stagnant water or what, but I smelled terrible. So she took me home with her, and at that time I had, black eye, bruises all over me, and she took pictures, and she took me to I don't know where it was at the time, I guess somewhere up in town she lived like 2 counties away from us, but she took me back to the county where we lived and where we got married to file for a divorce and to get restraining orders or whatever I needed. And they told me that if I needed anything at the house, if I wanted anything out of the house, I needed to get it then. It's a whole lot different then than it is now. And I said, well, I'm not going there alone. We lived at his grandmother's house, just us, but I just didn't know if he was going to be there or whatever. So I took a police officer with us. They followed us out there, and he couldn't go in the house. because Roger's grandmother would not let the police officer in the house. There was no apparent danger. It was her house. She owned it. She could tell him whether or not he could come in or not. So he stood on the front porch and said, "I can't come in, but if something happens and you need anything, you scream and I'll come in because there's apparent danger." So I start up the stairs, and as I get to the top of the stairs, I see Roger there. And he's got a little pocket knife in his hand, and he's like he's stabbing himself. So I scream, "Here comes the police officer." The police officer runs up the steps, and he just looked at him and said, "Son, get up. You ain't even cutting yourself." He didn't have a mark on him. He was nasty. He stank. He had been drinking. I don't know how long it had been since he'd had a bath. He had hickeys all over his neck. Why is he doing this? And I looked around, and all I had was clothes, most of which were too big for me anyway. So I thought, there's not a damn thing here I need. I don't need any of this stuff. I'm just leaving. So I walk down the stairs. He's following me. I'm out to the yard. There's a big fight. Him trying to get to me in the car. My sister going into protective mode. She would have surely whooped his ass if she could have. The police officer wouldn't have been there. Probably didn't need him. Probably would have been better off just taking her. But the police officer held him off the car. Roger had thrown me a note. He had thrown a note in the car. He gave it to my sister. Somehow I ended up with the note. And the police officer told my sister, said, "Go down to the store. There's an old store. It wasn't a store anymore, but it was at the stop sign." He said, "Just go down there, wait on me, and I'll be there in a minute." So we go down there, and I open the note, and it's a suicide note. If I leave him, he can't live without me. He loves me. He's going to kill himself. And I started ripping it up into shreds, roll the window down, throw it out, and about that time the police officer rolls up. So I was just bawling. It was just a horrendous event. And the police officer told me, he said, "Just don't ever," he said, "Sweetheart, don't ever go back to him. He's going to kill you if you go back to him." I'm like, I know, and I just love him so much. And he's like, "No, you don't. You don't know what love is. You're too young." And the whole typical story everybody tells any woman in that situation. So he told us he was going to follow us to the county line so he could make sure that Roger or nobody else was following us, because nobody knew where my sister lived. So we got almost to the county line, and the police officer turned on his lights and turned around in the road and went back. So I thought, we're far enough. He's followed us far enough. There's nobody following us. He probably got a call in the area, whatever. So when we got home, when we got to my sister's house, the phone was ringing. And my sister answered the phone, and she, I'm going to say these words these little cuss words. I hope that's okay. All I heard my sister say was, "I hope the bastard dies from what he's done to my sister. I hope the bastard dies because of what he's done to my sister." And I thought, what is it? She said, "Don't worry about it. He's just being stupid." The next morning, my foster mom called. My sister answered the phone, and her face just went pale. And we had found out that Roger had shot himself. He had left there. He had went to his mom and dad's house. He had walked in. He had grabbed the gun and went out the back door, and he shot himself. They called the ambulance, and he was still alive, but he died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. I think it was just so far out that he basically just bled to death. So the next few days of going to the funeral home, I had no money. He had no life insurance. His parents had agreed to pay for the funeral and make all the arrangements and take care of everything as long as I was not allowed to be there. Well, they couldn't legally tell me I couldn't be there, but they just said they would keep me separated. So at the funeral, so I agreed. Obviously, I couldn't pay for a funeral. At the funeral, they kept me off to the side. I didn't have any interaction with his parents or anybody else there. The chapel had a door off to the side, and they opened it and put chairs there, so I was sitting back where his parents and sister and stuff couldn't see me. At the graveside, I stood back in the back. All of his friends stood beside me. They sat with me, and they stood by me whenever we were at the graveside. So at 18 years old, here I was, a widow, thinking it was my fault. If I hadn't have left, he would still be alive. Um, why couldn't I just deal with it? My mom, my biological mom, and my biological dad both came to the funeral. I had not seen either of them. Well, I had not seen my biological mom since I went to foster home. I had not seen my biological dad since my wedding day. He did walk me down the aisle, him and my brother. I found out later that him and my brother tried to bribe Roger that day and give him money not to marry me. And he wouldn't take it. Surprise, but... So anyway, they came, and it showed me that they did love me, and they were there for me, through the funeral. And I lived with my sister for a while, but I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to finish school. And I wanted to finish school where I was going to school. So I moved in with a friend of mine, a different, really good friend of mine. She was actually dating one of Roger's friends. Her parents let me move in. She drove us to school and lived with them for a while. And then I got sick, didn't have any insurance, and my foster parents offered and said that because I had been out of foster care for less than a year and I was back in school, that I could come back and live with them. And I did. And I thought, what am I thinking? I'm going back under their rule. But I had saved up, I had worked, because I only had to go to senior English. I had all my credits to graduate, I just had to go to English class. So I worked in the office first period. Then I went to English class, and then I would leave school and I would walk to this local restaurant, and I waited tables, saved up enough money to buy my first car. And it was a 5-speed, and I couldn't drive it. So I couldn't even leave with it. But my friend's dad drove it home, and he taught me how to drive it. So when I went back to live with my foster parents, I had a car. So I was able to drive myself to school. I was still able to work. And I seen a whole different side of my foster parents. They chose then to take me. They did not have to take me back into their home, especially after all I had put them through, running away and sneaking around and doing whatever. But I was living with them, and one day in the office, I worked the office first period, and Army recruiter. Back in the 80s, you did not see a lot of people in uniform. People in uniform are not allowed to just be out wandering around like they do now. You definitely didn't see women. I'd never seen a female in uniform before. So the Army recruiter had come in and gotten a student and had to talk to him about something. And so I went and got the student out of class, and I just thought it was fascinating to see a soldier. And I told my foster mom about it. And she just came up with this, that's what you need to do. You need to join the Army. You need to get away from here. You need to explore the world. That's going to give you such opportunities. And I thought, no. That's not why I told you that. I didn't want to join the Army. I was just telling her. I thought it was kind of cool, So she wouldn't stop talking about it until making an appointment with this recruiter for me to go talk to. And I didn't have enough inside me. Even though I was 18 years old at the time, I didn't have whatever it was to say, no, I don't want to do this. I just didn't. So I went and talked to the recruiter. And in my adolescent brain, I thought, well, there's no way I would be able to do this. I physically can't do this. I'm not smart enough to do this. They'll reject me. Okay, I'll play your silly little game. They'll reject me. It's not going to be a problem. I didn't say that out loud, but I was thinking that in my head. So we go talk to the recruiter. He tells me I have to go take a test to see if I qualify to be in the military and what I would qualify to do in the military. So I thought, okay, he gave me all these study guides. I wasn't studying for nothing. He came and got me to go take the test, and I remember just sitting there thinking, I'll fail the test. I'll just fail the test. I'll answer enough questions right where they don't know I just totally bombed it. But I started making a Christmas tree pattern. It had little circles. You have to fill them in with a little number 2 pencil. So I started making a Christmas tree pattern with the number 2 pencil and the little bubbles. And I did answer enough of them right where if they went through, if I got a bad enough score, if I got a 0, obviously they'd know I intentionally failed it. So about, I don't know, 2 or 3 days, a week later, the recruiter called, went in with my foster mom, and he said, well, you did really good on your test. And I thought, oh shit, what do I do now? Like, okay, what's my next strategy? So he started showing a video of girls going through basic training, marching, and doing all this physical stuff, PT, I was like, there's no way. I'll die. Like, do you see me? Do you see me? I am like, look, I'm 165 pounds right now. I weighed 85 pounds when Marjorie died. I was a skeleton with skin draped over it. So I thought, okay. He said, well, when you go to basic training, these are the jobs you qualify for. Pick whatever you want. So I did, and I thought, well, I'll go to basic training, and I'll be home within a week. Because they'll see I physically cannot do this. Like, they'll reject me. I'm not good enough. And I went to basic training, and I got off of that bus, and I thought, I've got to get out of this. There's no way. They were screaming, hollering, up in your face, spitting in your face. You were having to do push-ups all the time. This was insane. What was I thinking? And I forget to tell you that in order to be able to ship to basic training, I had to weigh 100 pounds. They had a minimum weight, right? So I weighed 85 pounds. 90, I think I weighed between 85 and 90 when I went through my MEPS physical. And they told me, in order to ship, you have to weigh 100 pounds. Well, this was like January, and I was supposed to ship. When I graduated high school in May, I was going to ship in June, right after I graduated high school. And I thought, it's hard for me to gain weight. I can't gain weight. I'm just going to, not eat. I won't be able, they won't ship me because I won't weigh enough. Well, apparently, obviously, somebody talked to my foster mom because she started fixing all my favorite foods. And when I went to ship, I weighed 99 pounds. And the nurse went, oh, congratulations, and flipped it over to 100. So here I shipped. And then they're all spitting in my face and screaming at me. And I thought, I won't make it a week. And I ended up making it through basic training, making it through AIT, Fort Jackson, South Carolina. I came home. My foster mom, I had found out my foster mom had breast cancer while I was in basic training. And they wouldn't let me come home because she wasn't my biological parent. So when I got home, she had gone through chemo, all of the things. She had had a mastectomy and reconstruction. And she had battled it. She went into remission. And I stayed with them for some months after I graduated. I had a new boyfriend at this time, and he went to basic training too. We were going to be in the Army together, and everything's going to be great. And he ended up being abusive. And when the night that I broke up with him, and I had come back from basic training in AIT, realizing I could pretty much do whatever I put my mind to, and I didn't have to tolerate being treated that way. And I was never going to let a man put his hand on me ever again. I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof because I had made it through basic training. So when he started getting abusive and he was drinking a lot, I broke up with him. I went home, and I remember that night his father calling me and telling me he's out in the backyard, he's got a gun, he's going to kill himself. And I'm like, let him. And I hate that. He didn't shoot himself. He was faking it, but he is in prison now for killing somebody, but it wasn't me and it wasn't himself. Anyway, I ended up doing well in the military, accepted well. I did a great job. Whatever I did, I wanted it. If my name was on it, I wanted it to be 100%. I wanted it to be good. I met my second husband. We had 2 children. Was married to him for, I think we were together like 7 or 8 years. And, that ended. He had a different idea of what marriage was like, should be like. He wanted to be single and married at the same time. We didn't argue. We didn't fuss fight. He never put his hand on me. He just wanted to be single and run around and with his friends and to the bars and to the casinos and do the things he wanted to do, but then come home to a wife and kids. And I wanted a husband, not a roommate. So then I met husband number 3, He was my knight in shining armor. I was working 2 jobs. I was bartending at night. I was working in the military during the day, bartending at night. Had a stalker stalking me, cutting my tires. I mean, it's insane. I just attract them. I'm like a big magnet for crazy guys. I'm married to your father now. There's no relation whatsoever. We'll get to that. But he came and he would sit at the bar and wait until it closed because the owners and stuff would leave, and I was there by myself. And so we connected. I got pregnant with Samantha. We got married, and it was good. He was good to me. He was a good man. Treated me and the kids very well. We had the house. We had nice cars for Christmas. We had been married, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. Everything was great. We had 4 kids together. We had 4 kids. I was the soccer mom, Boy Scout mom. Kids were all in sports. We went on vacation for the first time. We went on vacation every year as a family with other families, and were normal, and he deployed. He was getting ready for deployment. He was going to deploy in 2004. That Christmas, before he was leaving out to deploy, that Christmas, I had bought him a truck. Financially, we were good. And I had surprised him. Me and the kids wrapped the key up in a box. We had it hid at his dad's house. And as we pull up, I reach and grab him the key, and we pull up, and the headlights are there, and it was a brand new truck sitting there. I mean, he was just blown away. So we had it made. We had it going on, and he's a good man. He's a good husband. So when he got ready to deploy, I just knew there was no way, this was going to take us down. But it did. Deployment is hard on families. I won't go into all the details, but by the time he got home from deployment, I had moved everything out of the house, and when he came home to an empty house. And if I had it to do over again, I would have done that differently. That was horrible. At that point, I had not deployed at that time. Our daughter was 5 at the time he deployed. She turned 5 on August 8th. She started school on August 9th. He deployed like August 11th, like a few days later. And since then, well, from that point, from when she was 5 until she was 16, 17, me or him, one, were gone all the time. He was deployed, I was gone, I was deployed, he was gone to different exercises. Just, she grew up with pretty much one or the other of us being gone all the time. So after we divorced, single mom, I was living in an apartment, and I bought a house all on my own. Didn't have to have any help. I had a decent car. I bought a new car, good car for the family. Had a motorcycle. Was riding motorcycles at the time. And we bought the house. Still have it. And I raised my kids there. A year or two into living in the house, I think I'd been there maybe a year. A friend of mine at work. Well, let me digress just a little bit, because about the same time that I was buying the house, my father got sick, my biological father. And my sister called me and said, "Hey, would you go check on Dad?" It was Father's Day. I was dropping my kids off at the military kids camp. They have a military kids camp every year, and they'd get to go and play Army for a whole week. I dropped them off at kids camp, and I went and found the place where my dad lived, because I didn't have any relationship with my dad. I mean, I seen him maybe 4 or 5 times the last 10 years of his life. I ran into him at the gas station a couple of times, and it was a good conversation. I wasn't ever disrespectful. It was just, "Hey, how are you doing?" "Oh, I'm doing good. How are you?" "Oh, doing great." "Oh, how are the kids?" "They're doing great, growing like weeds." And then we'd part our ways. But my sister called me and said that he was sick, that he'd been laying on the couch and had not eaten or drank anything in a week. I'm like, okay. She couldn't get to him. My other sister couldn't get to him. So I found the house. It was about an hour away. Took him to the hospital and ended up finding out he had cancer. And the next few days, it just took a couple of days to realize how bad the cancer was, and it had metastasized, and they were giving him a diagnosis of maybe, at first it was maybe 6 months to a year, but within a couple of days, they ended up saying, you probably got maybe 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. So my aunt showed up at the hospital. She had an envelope, one for my oldest sister and one for me. I have 2 other sisters sitting there. I'm kind of in the middle toward the end. And it was a power of attorney. And my dad, 2 years prior to this, had done a power of attorney for my oldest sister for everything financial, and had done a power of attorney for me to make all medical decisions if necessary, something were to happen. And I thought, why me? Out of everybody sitting here, I have the least relationship with him. Like, the least. But it is what it is. So I thought, okay, well, I'll do what I gotta do, whatever. And so I was there. Me and my oldest sister, one, was there every day at the hospital. I was there the day they told him, Mr. Hastings, you have maybe 2 to 3 weeks to live. Where there's nothing else we can do. His response was, well, damn, okay. It's pretty much all you could say, So I ended up taking him to my house. Had hospice set up the beds, do all the things. And I had my dad at my house. People came, my uncle came, we started talking funeral arrangements, things like that. And one day we were giving him me and my good friend of mine were giving him a bath, and I picked up his arm. We were going to roll him over, and his arm broke in two. His arm right here just made a V in my hands. So we ended up taking him to the hospital, and they told us that day, they told me that the anesthesiologist told me that his organs were already shutting down, and that if they did the surgery, and they were going to put a rod in, but he wouldn't make it through the surgery. But it was my decision to do that, either keep him comfortable medication-wise, and he could pass, basically in the next couple of week, they didn't know how long. Or they could do the surgery, but knowing he wouldn't make it through the surgery, they told us we needed to go ahead and say our goodbyes. So basically, I felt like they were saying, you either put him to sleep and get him out of his misery, sign here, and he'll go home, or let him lay here in pain, in misery, for the next however long. It was an impossible decision for me to make for my father. He was not a dad. He was not a great dad. He wasn't a dad at all. But he was my father. And they were looking at me to make this decision. And I had to make the decision because he's knocked out. They've got him drugged up. And I have a power of attorney. So I go outside. I smoked at the time. I probably smoked half a pack of cigarettes. Ended up in the chapel, praying, thinking, God, I don't know how to make this decision. Like, this is terrible. This is the worst position I've ever been put in my life. This is my father. He's the reason why I'm alive. So as I go back upstairs, I was downstairs by myself, I walk back upstairs, and my sisters and my aunt were standing in the hallway. And they were like, hey, Dad's awake. I'm like, what? Like, he was, literally, they just had him drugged out, just out. And so obviously I had been downstairs longer. So I go in the room, and he's sitting up. He says, hey, Pumpkin, how are you? And I said, hey, Dad. I said, I got to talk to you. And I basically told him exactly what the doctors had told me. I said, if I have to make the decision, you gave me the decision of power of attorney, if you could not make this decision yourself. So I sat there on the side of the hospital bed and told him what the doctors had said, and asked him, I said, you are talking to me. You can tell me what you want. Tell me what you want, Dad. Because if you want, I'll sign the paper, and you can tell us all goodbye, and you'll be out of this pain. Or I can take you home, and you can, spend the next few weeks saying your goodbyes to everybody. And he said, I want to go home, but I want to go home to War Trace. And that's where he had lived with his little girlfriend. I said, okay. So I made calls. I got him in an ambulance, or they took him by ambulance, and I had all the hospice people move all the stuff from my house in Smyrna over to War Trace, which is about 45 minutes away, I guess. Followed the ambulance all the way to the house, thinking, the next time I follow a vehicle with my father's body in it, he's going to be dead. Like, this is it. Like, I have this next little period of time to spend with him. And I had wasted all these years, and I started going into this, why couldn't he just be the dad that he should have been? Why did we have to miss out on all those years? Why couldn't he come rescue me from a foster home? Why this? Why that? And I was a mess. I was a mess. I was mad. I had so much anger toward him, toward God, toward everything. So we got to the house, and he had a few good days. Once we got there, he was, the hospice people would come in and kind of help us manage medication, but me or my older sister, one, was there with him every day. And we got to share our favorite butter pecan ice cream. And he got an opportunity to speak to each of us girls and say his last goodbyes and tell us, his last words for us. His last words for me were that he wanted me to give the Jehovah's Witnesses a chance. He wanted me to give them an opportunity to show me that they were not all like the congregation that my brother belonged to, and that my judgment of them had been too harsh. So of all things, he's talking to me about this on his deathbed. This is the last conversation. And I had a horrible attitude toward the Jehovah's Witnesses at that time in my life. And so, long story short, he passed away. And a few months later, a friend of mine introduced me to a guy at work. We went out on a date, connected. We started dating. He invited me early on. I think it was like the first weekend or so that we were kind of dating. He invited me and the kids over to his house for a barbecue, a cookout at his house. So I show up. His whole family's there. Got kids running around everywhere. His sister's there. Friends, everybody. And I realized and found out that day that every single person at that party, besides me and my kids, were Jehovah's Witnesses. So I thought, okay, Dad, okay, these are nice people. I mean, super nice people. They welcomed us in with open arms. They were great people. I met some of the greatest people I've ever met that were Jehovah's Witnesses, by the way, during that relationship. That ended up being a horrible relationship. He was an alcoholic from job to job. It was terrible. We were together 4 years. And the relationship ended right before I deployed. He shot himself in my dining room. He took a little tiny pistol about the size of the palm of my hand and shot himself in the leg because I had left and I was trying to get him out of my house. He wouldn't leave, so I left with my kids. And I was getting ready for deployment, and I just wanted it done. I just wanted it to be all over. And he was in the hospital, and I went to the hospital because I was his wife. So I go to the hospital, pull back the sheet. I see this little hole about this big in his leg and thought, you can't even shoot your damn self right. So I committed him to a mental hospital trying to kill himself. He was there for, I don't know, however long they have to keep you, and they called me in and, oh, you're the wife. He's going to be discharged. He's going to come home. And I was like, he ain't coming to my house. He can go somewhere, but he ain't coming to my house. I'm not going to be here to pick him up. So he needs to call another ride. Call a ride, call an uncle, call a friend. I don't care. I was absolutely done. Over the next few weeks, he literally stalked the house. He was trying to do whatever he could to get to me and my kids. I could not even safely stay at home. I got restraining orders. I got order of protections. I got everything. I ended up, the day I deployed, I had all my stuff in my car. I was driving to my deployment station. It was the last deployment, the 2011. And, January 2011. And I was standing in the courtroom in my uniform, telling the judge, I'm getting ready to deploy for a year. Everything happened. He had gone to jail. During this few weeks, he had gone to jail. They had called me. They had told me he's being released. He has been told he absolutely cannot have any contact with you. Nobody he knows can have contact with you. while I'm on the phone with the jailer telling me he's being released. I said, well, you obviously gave him his phone back because he's calling me right now. So they get in their cars. They try to catch him in the parking lot. Follow him all the way to my car, all the way to my house. He didn't pull in the driveway. So anyway, by the time we end up in court, the judge told me, leave this county. Don't ever come back. Don't have any contact with her kids, with her grandkids. Nobody. If you do this, I'm going to put you under the jail. So at that point, the divorce got started, was filed, and while I was deployed, the divorce was final. So after I got home, he was still trying to contact me. It was just, he didn't give up. He was sending pictures. He sent a picture in the middle of the night. It was like a week after I got home. I'd been gone a year. And he had sent a picture of a dog. I was like, hey, you and the kids are going to love this dog I found on the side of the road. And I thought, surely to goodness, he's sending this to the wrong person. Like he's drunk. They don't know who he's sending it to. I ignored it. Then he called. So I pick up the phone. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. So did you get that picture I sent you? I said, do you realize who you're talking to? Like, and he said, yeah, it's Nancy. I was like, dude, you're not supposed to have it contact me. Well, I just want to come see you. I'm on my way now. I said, oh, okay. Okay, well, I'll see you when you get here. He go, oh, you're going to shoot me when I get there? And I was like, who said that? You're saying that. I said, come on. I'll be sitting out on the back porch. I'll be sitting out there smoking a cigarette. He didn't show up. I knew. I had it in my plan. I would have just shot him. I was just at that point. When I got home from deployment, I was angry. I was mad. My stepfather had passed away while I was deployed. My stepfather that had abused me. My mom had divorced him right after that. She's married to a different man now. But I got the phone call, the Red Cross message. My stepfather passed away. Found out it was my sister's dad. So, right before I deployed, digress just a little bit to kind of open with that story because it's kind of toward the end. But a week before I deployed, my family, my brothers and sisters and stuff had gotten together at my house. They wanted to have me get together before I deployed. My brother had called and asked if his dad could come, which is my stepdad. And I had seen him throughout the years. No big deal. He couldn't hurt me anymore. It was over. It was done. I didn't sit and chit-chat with him, but, he was my sister's and my brother's dad. So I had to see him at different occasions. So I said, sure, I don't care. Whatever. Here this was 20-something years later. I wasn't worried about him hurting me or saying anything. He was there. It was just, there was a lot of people there. I was getting ready to deploy. It was a chaotic day. As he was leaving, he stopped in my dining room. And he looked at me with tears in his eyes. And he looked at me and said, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the woman that you have become. And every flash of lightning that could have come took me back to that night when he said he was proud of me for all that I was doing. And I could have gutted him right there. I could have. But my sisters didn't know why I went to foster home. They were young. Nobody ever told them. It was just, nobody ever talked about it. Nothing ever happened to him. So it was just swept under the rug and nobody ever talked about it. I didn't say anything. I just said, thanks. He left. 2-3 months into my deployment, got the Red Cross message, and he had passed away. And why I was so angry, I guess I know now. I didn't know at the time. But they were telling me I could go home for the funeral. I could take my leave and go home. My son was graduating high school while I was deployed. And they had given me my 2 weeks to come home were the last week of May, first week of June, so I could be home for my son's graduation, his high school graduation. I had to be away from my kids for a year. I was going to make my son's graduation. So I thought, no, F him. I am not using my leave to go to that. I couldn't. Everybody was asking me why I was so upset. They thought I was all so upset because I loved him so much and all this. And I was just like, just leave me alone. You don't understand. I'm not going to go into it. But I thought, they gave me the option to come home for a week. It wouldn't use my leave where I wasn't going to miss seeing my son graduate, but I could come home, be with my family, be with my sister and all that. So I came home for a week, came to the funeral. He was buried. It was done. And I felt like if I can just see it and I can see his casket go into the grave, then I'm going to have healing. It's going to be done. I'm going to know it's over now. It's done. Went back, came home got to see my son graduate from high school, got home from the deployment. Troy was still trying to contact me. It was terrible. Call the police, get all that stuff involved again. Finally, he stopped. Finally, I guess he just registered. Okay, I'm done. I was done. I had had a conversation with God in the middle of Iraq. Bullets going over, top of my head. I'm out 2 o'clock in the morning, smoking a cigarette, just looking up at the sky. I'm like, God, I'm done. The next, I can't pickle. Obviously, I suck at this. So the next one is just going to really have to smack me in the face. And it did. And then I met Rodney. And he was going through a tough time. He was going through a divorce. I had just gone through what I'd gone through. We had been deployed together. We're all hanging out in the same circle. We're good friends. And when you share trauma. It's not trauma, but pain. You know, when you're sharing that pain together and you grow close. And he's a great man. So we ended up getting married. We've been married 10 years now. He's made it longer than any of the rest of the ones. So now his goal is to make it enough time that we've been married that it accumulates all the time of previous husbands. So he's got just a couple more years to go to put up with me. But we live here in East Tennessee now, and life is good. I've found myself through all of it growing closer and closer to God. This place where I live now is a prime example of that, because just like with basic training, I did not want to live here. I love Maynardville. I love East Tennessee, but it was this house. I had my house plans. We were going to build a house right over the hill. Big old 3,000 something square foot house. It's going to be able to have plenty of room for the grandkids, have a big old farm. I was going to homestead. We was going to have it made. COVID hit. Housing supplies went crazy up. And this little place came up for sale, and it connects to family land, connects to Rodney's dad's land, which was great and fine and dandy. But this place is 800 something square feet. This is not my 3,000 something square foot house. So he wanted to just come look at it. So I agreed. And I was driving. I'd never been up here before. I was driving, and I went to come up the driveway. And the very first time I tried to come up the driveway, I got stuck halfway up. Had to back down. It took me 4 times to get up this driveway. By the time we get to the 4th time of me trying to get up this driveway, he's over in the passenger seat saying, "Don't let off of it. Don't let off of it." I backed down to the bridge, and I bared down on that gas. I'm not letting off of it. It was just, by the time I got up to the top, my father-in-law was up here, and he was just smiling because he could see all the funniness of. He thought it was funny. I did not think it was funny at all. So I come walking in, and I thought, oh, well, okay, it's cute, but still, it's not what I want. And I was thinking the whole time, God, how do I convince my husband? I respect my husband. I respect, what he wants to do here and why. But this is not what I want. I know this is not what's meant to be. Like, how can I talk him out of this? The whole time I'm just boiling inside. And I walk out that door, and I walked out on this porch. And a feeling of peace came over me. And I knew God was telling me, this is where I need you right now. And I looked at my husband and said, okay, this is where we need to be right now. And so God has proven to me over and over and over again, when I try to be in control of my plans, when I am going to put my hand on it, I make it a whole disaster. And when I lean on him and I trust him, his plan is way better than my plan. A lot of people ask me all the time how, when they hear, bits and pieces of my story, how do you have joy? How do you how do you have a smile on your face? How do you do it? And I'm like, Jesus. I mean, that's really, in all honesty, from the time I can remember, I can just know that Jesus has always been with me. He's always gotten me through it. So no matter the pain you go through in life, no matter the trauma, no matter the failed relationships, the failed business ventures, the failed, um, you, I deal with women now in addiction. I was a director of a women's sober living home for a little while, and now I own a cleaning business to hire women that are coming out of trauma, whatever that trauma may be, domestic violence, addiction, alcoholism, and that's the women I hire for my business to clean. And I get to mentor with them, and I get to have relationships with them and watch them grow in their relationships with God and themselves. They're growing and doing amazing. Not all of them all the time, but um, I've built some great relationships in that, and I've learned a lot. My relationship with God has gotten so much more and just deeper going through what I go through with these girls. Um, and I guess from my testimony, at the end of it, just saying to anybody out there that has gone through, is going through, or will go through pain and trauma and things in life that just seem unfair, or it's not God, that's the devil. He's trying to bring you down, and God has a plan. Lean on Him, trust in Him, and know that through Him you can get through anything in life.